Welcome to What's Up, the show where I take clean energy conversations off-grid. So in this episode, I'm joined by Tim Highfield, who's the co-founder of Kondor. This is a company tackling one of the dirtiest secrets in clean energy, industrial energy waste. Tim and the team at Kondor are building AI agents that help factories and industrial sites optimize their energy use in real time. So think of it as turning messy data into smarter, greener decisions. They've just raised pre-seed funding to scale across the UK and beyond. So today we're going to dig into exactly how they got there. Now let's get into it. I guess one of the first questions that I pulled together is just handing it over to you and kind of giving you the floor to kind of explain, your story and what were you doing before setting up this business, and like how did you come to one day wake up and go, I'm gonna do my own thing?
Yeah, okay. So I guess, chemical engineer by degree. I've worked in the oil and gas industry for 25 years or so with some of the EPC contractors and consultants, and so done every stage of project design from blank sheets of paper all the way through concept, feed, EPC into performance testing, and then brownfield modifications of those facilities as well. Mixture of onshore, offshore, LNG, kind of across the spectrum worldwide. And then spent probably the last 5 or so years more specialising in energy efficiency and trying to help clients and customers understand where they're using energy, how effectively they're using that, and then what can they do about it. Sounds pretty simple, but it's not. Part of that, I worked with some guys who were designing a software package, and they were working for a larger organisation, went through restructure, most of them left and found other roles, and it kind of occurred to me that as a startup, maybe there's a role to play in that, because you're more agile, you can move in a way that an established company can't. You've not got those legacy systems, processes, etc. So you can kind of start from the ground up and do something a little bit different. And so, I came together with Peter, my co-founder, through Deep Science Ventures as a venture creator, and then span out the company, and we're off and running.
It's pretty cool. That's awesome. Do you want to explain, just anyone watching this, what Kondor actually does and what's your mission and what you're building out?
Yeah, so Kondor is a co-pilot for industrial energy efficiency and decarbonisation. So we run an agentic AI solution which analyzes data from industrial facilities to identify which items of equipment are the good, the bad and the ugly. And so what you can do at the equipment level, but then what can you do at the process level in utilities and the overall facility, and then roll that up to enterprise level to help you understand what equipment needs maintenance, what needs replacement, where you should adjust set points, etc., in order to find that best efficiency point for operation at any point in time. But also, how do you plan for the longer term roadmap to net zero? What are the logical economic steps to do that? And how do you move that forward? So kind of the here and now and the future steps you need to take.
I find for us, whenever we're speaking to like a really traditional business, so to speak, and I know energy, it's like you mentioned a lot of these larger companies, because it's high capital requirements to get involved in energy. But do you find that because it's you're operating in somewhat a traditional space, it's hard to get for something like AI? Or do you see clients that you talk to, they're very excited, or are they more confused? Is there like a whole education process? It'd be good to understand how you approach that.
I think there's as many different types of people as there are companies out there in many ways, and it's more about the individuals you're trying to work with within the organization rather than the organization itself. So it's a bit like technology adoption cycles, where you get the early adopters and you go through and you've got the laggards at the end. Some organizations are very pro innovation, but some individuals inside traditional organizations are also very pro innovation. So if you get the organization that's got the people who want to be innovative, then you can move remarkably quickly with them, obviously subject to the organizational constraints they work in. Whereas, I think other people have always done it in a traditional way, will continue to do it in a traditional way until a lot of people have adopted it. So I think there's kind of a whole spectrum, as you'd kind of expect.
And I guess while you were building out the tech and while you were getting everything together, it'd be good to understand what was I guess if you were to single it down to one of the most unexpected challenges that came through, what would that have been while you were getting everything set up?
Unexpected challenges. I think that initial startup period is quite difficult. it's kind of that, celebration. You've got money, you can move forward and everything else. But then you realise all of a sudden that you need to do all the boring stuff. So you need to get an accountant, you need to set up your tax, you need to set up your payroll, you need to get your company insurance. Whilst you're going on this journey and you're quite excited about it, you kind of get dragged back by I'm going to say the admin side of the organisation, which isn't quite so nice. So you've got that dual thing of, I spend my time speaking to customers, speaking to investors, speaking to people like yourself, but then also, dragged back into admin to do that as well. And it's like, it needs to be done, but it's never the most exciting bit to get bogged down in.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you firsthand from having a business in the Philippines versus the UK. Here, the level of bureaucracy is insane, and I don't know how anything gets done, to be honest. And there's a ease of doing business rankings every year. I can't remember. I want to say Transparency International, but I feel like that might be for something else. But there's this ease of doing business rankings, comes out every year, and the last one I saw, Philippines was ranked 100 and something below South Sudan, which is like a war-torn conflict country. So like, yeah, I think that's why I'm probably becoming bald, is from being here and battling the bureaucracy for so long and the admin.
I get told people are surprised I'm not more grey. Yeah, maybe that's the equivalent.
Is this your first company going off on your own?
Yeah, first startup for my co-founder Peter. It's his fourth.
Oh wow.
Um,
Okay. Okay, that's
yeah, so
good. There's
he's second as a founder, but he's been in very early stage on others. So
okay, cool. So there's my business partner Ollie. He's like I said, he's based in the UK. Him and I both started this accelerator called. It's part of this group called Entrepreneurs Organization. Like from doing that, it helped us scale our business. We haven't had any funding or anything like that, but it helped us scale from like the 200 a year sort of mark up to the 1 million plus in annual recurring revenue kind of mark. And once you graduate, you can then actually join Entrepreneurs Organization. And it's like a group of like-minded entrepreneurs that kind of do these forums and whatnot. And like basically, I called it like therapy almost, as like founder therapy.
yep,
But what I've got out of it though was some of these coaches that work within EO run on these operating systems. So there's different ones that different business owners like to follow. But the one I found really useful that helps me a lot, just like keeps me sane, is EOS. They call it Entrepreneur's Operating System. I don't know if you come across that, but there's a book called Traction by Gino Wickman. It's pretty good, and it gives you these frameworks on like running the business, and
yep.
it goes all the way from how you run your weekly meetings to how you do your accountability chart, which is like an org structure. But that's helped me a lot. Definitely worth a read.
Yeah, and I think there'll be a lot of things as we grow and scale that we don't need as a small team, but we'll pretty quickly have to get there because
Yeah,
roles and responsibilities become quite important as you grow. Make sure people are accountable for what they're doing.
yeah, absolutely. I'm interested to hear about your fundraising though, because you mentioned that. Do you want to talk about the recent it's a pre-seed raise, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, not that recent, although the press release is recent.
Yeah, that's what I'm going off of. Do you want to like what like how did you go about that? Because like there are a lot of people out there with a lot of good business ideas, but find it really hard to get funding, and it'd be good just to understand like how you went about that, how you pitched it, how you basically raised some money.
Yeah, so our first funding came via Deep Science Ventures, and it's part of our spin out from them, but it's still going through an IC program effectively. So we got some industrial backers and had to go through both internally with Deep Science Ventures and the corporate, what the market's like, and convince them that we've got a product that we can really take to life and move forward. So there's all the Tam Sam Som, etc., to go through to build the business case, to understand where you can move an enormous amount of customer discovery to kind of back the idea up. Getting the conviction of potential customers that they would want to buy a product, like we're suggesting, making. So whilst the investors themselves were, I think, identified, shall we say, as part of the venture creator, the whole process is kind of the same, and in many ways harder because you've got an industrial investor on the back end who's wanting to make returns off it. They're not like an angel investor who's maybe a bit more flexible in how they approach things.
And I guess one of the things that I'd love to get from this conversation as well is like, what the other guys like yourself out there, and if they're watching this and they want some advice from you, like what would that advice be in order to help other founders in these kind of high impact niches like yours? What would be sort of your recommendation there, or any advice to guys who are trying to raise money as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think the kind of network effect is something I think is very prevalent. A lot of the, cold introductions and things like that are very difficult to make. It's much easier if you can find somebody who can make an introduction for you, and, that gets you more traction than just a cold message on LinkedIn or a cold email to them. And so I think, trying to build on your network is a key thing to do it. But then understanding, that different VCs and your companies invest at different times. You have conversations with a lot of people and they're like, you're too early for us, but, we need to see ABC to get more traction. There's a lot of knockbacks, but it's really about how you kind of move forward on that and try and progress the business at the same time as you're trying to progress, the investment. So they're both hand in hand. And I think in the kind of software world, it's very different from that traditional hardware world, right? I mean, hardware's very much a waterfall type process. You know that you've got to go through the stages of scale up and the TRL levels to get to market. Software can move rapidly in different directions and kind of agile fashion and pivoting on what you're going to do. So, even this week we were speaking to a potential customer. They've got a project ongoing which they'd like to use the software on. So even next month we could have a customer live inside our software. So alongside the pilots that we've got going, and that entirely pivots our journey and fundraising and everything else and the needs. So, being able to tell that story as you go and you evolve and why you're evolving, and it's quick, it's rapid, I think is all part of the almost authenticity you need with investors, part of that journey.
Thanks for that, Tim. I guess one of the things I wanted to talk about as well is the market and kind of what the future holds. But I guess while we're talking about your experience with Kondor and your kind of journey so far, if you look to the future, what does success look like for you in, say, a year and a half? Is that going to be raising more capital? Is that going to be acquiring more customers? Like, how does that look like from your side?
Yeah, so, we're going through another investment round now to top up the pre-seed we had. I guess year's time or so, we'll have rapidly expanded the team. We'll have customers on board in the software, using the software 24/7, some consultancy companies using it for projects as well, and hopefully on a very good growth trajectory, really, and moving that forward and trying to bring in more features that customers are asking for and requesting, and getting that feedback and collaboration with the customers to give them the product that they need to have to improve their business operations, both from the emissions GHG side, but also from a cost perspective, recognizing that a lot of these decisions are actually business decisions rather than environmental decisions in their own right.
Yeah. I guess because this is such a product that you guys have built out, right? And I'm thinking do you have a lot of competition in the market as well for what you're doing, or is it quite limited?
Yeah, I mean, there is competition and people are doing it in different ways. I think that probably makes the market a bit more interesting. We're not learning with customers' data, which we know is a big issue for some with confidentiality and IP and everything else. We're not trying to provide a black box that solves everything. We're trying to provide a platform that's transparent and auditable, so people can understand why we say that a piece of equipment's not performing correctly. They can understand that. I think the engineers out there don't like black boxes, and they've been taught not to trust them for decades of experience and things like that. So making sure that they can understand why it's coming up with the solutions it's coming up with, that grows trust and everything else. And I think there's just different companies doing things in different ways. There's obviously some of the legacy players in there as well who've got legacy systems which weren't AI first and which are also trying to layer AI on top. But hopefully we're doing something in a different way, a bit more novel, that allows people to do more than some of those legacy ones can do.
And you mentioned something interesting. You mentioned that you can't use customers' data to train your models. Is that right? Because of privacy restrictions?
So one of the things that we're seeing in the market is that companies are very sensitive of their data. They see it as their intellectual property. It contains their unique knowledge, and they want to retain that. And so there's a lot of nervousness of handing that across to companies to learn from, to then transfer to a competitor. So they see that as their competitive edge. Yeah, deliberately not learning from that and placing it inside our models, etc. Is part of what we're doing to maintain that transparency in what we're doing. So we're very clear that they own the data they give us, they own their results. The bit in the middle is our IP and what we do, but yeah, it's their data. They can take it out if they want to.
Because I've seen like that's such a big discussion now in like the AI space. I think it was, I can't remember, I read something where different sites that are getting scraped like daily, like more on the consumer
Yep.
side, like whoever's scraping Reddit, for example, for content. Reddit's getting like pretty irritated about that from my understanding, and other websites are as well. So people are trying to set up ways, or companies are trying to set up ways to not protect their IP, but like monetize it more by
Yeah, and
charging.
and I think it's the whole copyright issue in the
Yeah.
UK. People have fed whole books into AI, etc., and ditto with the music artists and everything else, right?
Yeah.
They own their um, creative works, as it were, and how do they get rewarded for that? And do they have a choice in whether it's fed into that AI or not? I think it's very difficult for organisations or for individuals that put a lot in the public domain because it's kind of freely available. But when you're dealing with data that is given to you for a purpose, it's all under confidentiality agreements, etc., then respecting that and understanding that and being very clear about what you're doing with that data, I think becomes more important and builds the trust, and that's really important in those relationships going forward.
Yeah, yeah. I saw another article the other day about like even now people just searching. I mean, I use different AI platforms like ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity or any of these guys. But it is like quite mad thinking about like what, like I'm gonna say it's like quite private stuff as well. And you are just like chucking like so much of what's in your brain in these different platforms. And what like I don't know, it's just like it's to me it's like gotten to the level now where if you're sharing stuff from ChatGPT, Google's now able to index those different shares, so you can actually search what a lot of people are searching in ChatGPT through via Google, because now they're crawling different pages in ChatGPT. So you
Yeah.
can actually do like really good market research using that methodology. But it is kind of crazy that that's like people's like private questions and private matter, basically.
Yeah, and I guess the prompts and everything else, is another debate in the whole AI space. Who owns the prompts, who owns what's generated from the prompts, and everything else. And I think it's quite an interesting area of ownership or lack thereof, shall we say,
Yeah.
that's going through. And I don't really know where that ends up, if if I'm quite honest. We know where we are as a company, and and everything else, but I think it's very vague, some of it, and particularly with some of the I'm going to say free AI models out there, the chat GPTs, etc., that you can use. You're obviously getting a service from them, but they're taking something from you, just as Google and Amazon and everyone else has done for years. They're obviously learning from that data, but yeah, where does it end up? I really don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm sure copyright lawyers are loving it right now, or loving it or hating it, because like I do feel like definitely use like less legal services, like smaller
Yeah.
things to like check documentation and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, we do still need lawyers. I'm sure you've experienced that through setting up your company and doing the fundraising and everything.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely need lawyers. I just saw something today on LinkedIn about an expert witness who was being hired, and someone had used ChatGPT to try and decide their rate and concluded that an expert witness was worth about minimum wage.
Oh,
I
well,
wasn't very happy at accepting that contract.
wow.
It's, I guess you can still get out, lots of results from hallucinations and everything else, and you've got no idea of the accuracy of what it's searching some of the time and everything else. So that transparency in there is kind of key to understanding what it's been given, and still having the ability to question, is it right? Does it make sense? Is that logical? Take a guy with 20 to 30 years experience in an industry who's going into court. Does it logically sound that he'd be paid less than someone who works in a local shop, and everything else? In your head, you should kind of question that and say, does it make sense?
Well, I think we're almost at the end. I always like ask like one question just to lighten the mood towards the end, I guess. But I always ask, and sometimes it kind of throws people off a bit. But if you weren't building Kondor, what would you be doing right now instead?
I don't know. I guess in my head, I've often wondered that, if I didn't go into the engineering path, what would I have done? And I'm probably one of those people who loves the kind of medical shows you see on TV and the ER stuff and everything else. So maybe I'd have gone down a route of medicine and everything else and helping people via that route. But yeah, got wrapped up in the route of chemical engineering, and hence, where I am now.
Yeah, I almost went down that route of going to medical school. I studied in the US, but I found out that in the US, it's like, I think it costs almost $1 million to be a doctor nowadays, from what I
Ouch.
heard. Just
Yep.
like the fees. And there was one guy I met when I was studying in Boston, and he'd been in school for 10 years, but he was doing something really niche, like something to do with like being a is some kind of surgeon, but specializing in your spinal cord or something like very, very specific. But he was like, yeah, I've been in school 10 years now and just trying to wrap things up. I'm like, whoa, wow.
That's a lot of training.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, Tim. Well, I won't give you much longer. Thanks so much for jumping on. And yeah, it's cool to hear about your journey with Kondor. And everyone kind of dreams about it. Not many people do it. So my hat's off to you for making that leap and doing it. And I'm sure you guys will be successful and have a good go at it. Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you very much for the opportunity. And yeah, look forward to catching up at some point.
Cheers, Tim. Thanks, man.
Thanks for tuning in to What's Up with myself, Alex Kaplan, as your host, where I take clean energy conversations off the grid. If you enjoyed this episode, hit follow and share it with someone who cares about the future of energy. Until next time, guys.